Actually, John's not here yet. I always,
Are live.
all right. Okay. A quorum being present, this meeting of the Annapolis Historic Preservation Commission will come to order. The commission operates pursuant to the land use article of the annotated code of the state of Maryland. Local authority for the commission is derived from the municipal code of the city of Annapolis, chapter 21, section 56. The purpose of the HPC is to preserve sites, structures, and districts of historical and architectural significance. Requirements for serving on the commission are detailed in section 8.06, chapter 21. The HPC operates pursuant to the State of Maryland Open Meetings Act, and therefore no pending application shall be discussed outside this meeting. Okay, that's the first item. Second is roll call. I am Tim Leahy. I serve as chairman. Will Scott.
Present.
Bobby Collins.
Present.
Kevin Smith.
Present.
Will Williams.
Present.
We also have John Tower, who serves as our staff, and Jackie Rouse from the Office of Planning and Zoning. Kim Consoli is not with us as our recorder tonight, but she will be watching the video and creating the minutes after that. Okay. Next on the agenda, I think we have approval of the minutes from July 11th. I believe it says 12th on the agenda, but it is approval of minutes for July 11th, 2023. Does anyone have any comments, questions, or changes? Seeing none, can I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, we're all approved. Okay. Next on our agenda is we don't have any applications tonight, but we do have a pre-app from the Hammond Harwood House. So let's go ahead. Madeline, promote. Hello. Shelley Wrench and Barbara Goyette. John, you're wandering around? Or is it me? Yes.
Muted, John.
Hello, Barbara. I know. I'm muting.
There we go.
There you go.
Okay.
Hi, Barbara.
Hi, Tim.
How are you?
I'm good. Thank you.
Okay. Shelley? Yes, Shelley's still trying to unmute too. Ding. Not quite yet. I was in a meeting the other night on my phone, and unmuting on your phone in a Zoom meeting is the most impossible thing in the world. Oh, for me.
I took getting some used to it, but once you do, you can figure it out, but it is kind of unintuitive at first.
Yeah, you have to click all over the place, and then even
Yeah, you have to right click and then choose various things.
Shelley's probably not on her phone though.
No, she has a PowerPoint too, so I hope she gets on.
Exactly, yeah.
There we go.
go.
Sorry, I thought you could hear me because I could hear you, but I'm here now. So Barbara, did you want to go ahead and give a introduction? And then I'll talk
Let
about-
me tee it up a little bit. This is a pre-application, which is a courtesy extended to an applicant who will probably apply, and no opinions or thoughts should be construed as approval or disapproval for the potential application. I just need you to acknowledge that.
Okay,
Okay? Yes? Okay. Thank you.
yes.
All right, there you go. So please proceed. And so we'll do, let us hear what your thoughts are, and then we'll have a discussion back and forth, and hopefully we'll provide you design feedback.
Thank you. Well, thanks all of you for listening to this Hammond Harwood House proposal to continue our preservations here at our 1774 site. We are working on the front streetscape along Maryland Avenue, and our aim is to make better use of the space and increase the site's desirability as a tourist destination in the historic district. The important areas to be addressed are the uneven and downtrodden brick sidewalk, various drainage problems that impact both the foundation of the house and the sidewalk, the lack of adequate space for visitors, especially crowds, to gather in front of the house. We've been working on these issues for about 4 years and have gone through the formal process of commissioning a cultural landscape study and then convening a committee of trustees here at the house. And we have worked with Shelley Wrench of Annapolis Landscape Architects to design a plan that addresses the issues that were identified in the cultural landscape study. We have received conditional approval from Maryland Historical Trust, which holds an easement on the property. Maryland Historical Trust has approved the first step in the project, which is an archaeological study of the areas to be impacted. Hammond Harwood House is it's important to Annapolis, and it's a vital source and example of historic preservation. Our aim with this project is to create a welcoming streetscape that matches the beautiful architecture of the house in its simplicity and elegance.
Okay, should I jump in now, Barbara?
Sure. Shelley has details of the plan.
So you can all see the plan, the graphic in front of you, correct?
Yeah,
No.
we can't share your, have you shared your screen, Shelley?
I did, but I thought you could already see it. So the question is, why can't you? Let me just go back, because we did the, do you see
There we
anything
go.
now?
Yeah, there you go.
Okay, great. So
I still don't see any. There we go.
do you see photograph?
Yep.
Okay, so
There we go.
you got something? Good.
There we go.
So we basically went through the formal process, and where we've arrived is essentially a maintenance project for the front sidewalk and lead walks. The photograph on this cover sheet for the design development set was taken, we think, between 1925 and 1935.
Hmm.
So the brick sidewalk is actually entirely within the city right away. And you can see that there was a post and chain detail in the front. Barbara had noted that there's been photographs where they were black. At this particular photograph, I chose they're white. It's mostly just so you could see that there is precedent on the site for that garden edge detail. Right now, the biggest problem is that the drainage hasn't worked for the last 250 years. All the drain leaders from the roof outfall right in the hyphens. And the water really just sits there. The finished floor of the entry level at the lead walks is only about 8 inches higher than the curb. So the water basically just sits, and, there's ice issues. It's just not a good situation. The bricks are loose. There's a lot of trip hazards, and there's really not quite enough space for the groups that come. So we had explored multiple options that actually expanded the brick sidewalk deeper into the site, but after going through the whole process, we've essentially ended up with a maintenance project to correct the drainage issues and give a little bit more definition to the edge of the brick sidewalk and create a little bit more texture in the planting, but very simple project. These are 2 photographs of, there's some really just some remnant foundation planting, nothing significant. You can see the rain gutter leader lines, more or less just outfall, and the water just sits undirected. So this project includes putting in 4 dry wells to capture that water and deal with that water so it doesn't have to run across the sidewalk. The upper diagram in this drawing shows the existing condition, and the lower diagram shows what we want to do to maintain the streetscape. The only difference in the extent of brick paving is making the lead walks slightly wider, because right now 2 people can barely pass one another. And we've also created a teeny bit more brick around the base of the main center stair, mostly because that's where the groups tend to gather and end up stepping on the lawn because there's literally no place to stand. This drawing, we've also calculated the square footage of the beautiful historic brick that we want to salvage. And we've estimated a 20% loss in the salvage because we know that some will break and not be usable. And we've calculated how many like-kind brick we're searching for. So we haven't actually found those brick yet, but we know we're on the path to find the best like-kind brick we can. For the way it calculates out is 900 square feet of like-kind brick. But the hope is that we'll essentially replace the pattern the same and use either the existing historic brick or suitable brick for the rest of the square footage that we need. We are proposing to reintroduce the garden edge post and chain, very simple detail, solid steel, painted black, and then a little bit of a brick edge detail just to give a sense of completeness to the sidewalk and also to protect the planting. The planting, we are proposing to take out the lawn and basically put in some ground covers with fairly low textures. It's kind of actually a tough planting place because this is the north facade of the house. So most of it sits in deep shade a lot of the time, but then the edge right at the edge of the sidewalk ends up being in full sun some of the time. We actually, would have preferred to use all native plants, but there really just aren't native evergreen ground covers that will survive these conditions. So we've selected a couple different types of vinca, which at first glance seems very pedestrian, but when you look back at the colonial records of plants that were used during this period of significance, vinca was actually on that plant palette. And then what we've also done, which doesn't really show up here, is we've selected a palette of bulbs that were used commonly during the period of significance and paired those bulb selections with each of these different ground covers so that there's a little bit more dynamic planting palette, even though essentially it's evergreen ground cover. So what we're really asking to do is maintain the sidewalks that we have and take care of the lawn that's in pretty bad shape from people walking on it and from other things that I won't mention here.
We all have dogs.
I know, I have a dog too. But anyways, we're really just trying to clean up the sidewalk. And I don't know, I know we've been working with John Tower, and I think he might have some thoughts on this, but it has, it's been quite an effort, but we've ended up with a very simple project. So that's really all I have to show.
All right. Well, thanks. As in our normal pre-application process, I kind of tee things up. And also, this on the surface is a relatively straightforward project and maybe could had gone through administrative approval, but there are aspects of this that kind of pick it up a little bit. I think to possibly well, we can have a discussion about that. So the plantings that are one aspect of it. The paving and then the post and chain are the kind of the three topics I think that we should discuss as commissioners. So I'll then throw it over to John. What are your thoughts? You've had conversations with the applicant.
Well, I am currently trying to source old brick within the city.
On the
I think
paving.
excuse me?
On the paving, so
Yeah.
you're starting off with the
Yeah.
paving topic, yeah.
Yeah, so for what is within the right of way, since there's repaving being done on Charles Street right now, I'm trying to get salvage brick from Charles Street that we can use here. And the amounts that are needed are, exceed what's available, but I'm hopeful. And I have to go up the chain of authority to get this. That's one thing. Secondly, the post and chain idea is certainly of a period. There is a precedent for it. I don't favor it because it definitely seems of a particular time as opposed to let's say the Hammond Harwood House as it presented itself over time. So there's a short period of time when the post and the chain was there, but then on the other hand, I do understand the problem, and it's a perennial problem, and no one wants to pick up after someone else's dog. So it's something to consider. In terms of the planting, I have to say, I didn't know that vinca had been used in colonial times. I've never seen anything photographically that shows anything other than either dirt or grass on the front of the Hammond Harwood House. And I guess that would be going back about 150 years to the oldest photograph that I've seen of it. However, I think that discussion can be left to the commissioners. So there's nothing here that is, let's say, how should I put this? A hard no. This is inappropriate. Couldn't be put here. Wouldn't fit here. Never was here. But there are things to discuss because honestly, the Hammond Harwood House started with a rich person, went to a second person who had more money and more interest in being in the colonies and the new country. And then after that, the Hammond Harwood House really never had an owner who could take care of it. And I have a pamphlet in my office from when St. John's was considering purchasing it, which they did. And that may have been when the post and the chains were installed. So after that, and full disclosure, I grew up across the street. So I looked at it every single day and really enjoyed it.
Yeah. Kind of goes.
Do you have dogs, John?
Sorry?
Saying this is not the first time. We all know this house so well. So
Right.
I'm sorry, it was Will.
And let me last thing. This is possibly the gem of the downtown Annapolis Historic District. I've always thought it was extraordinary in so many ways, and it is. And also full disclosure, I worked on stripping the cartouche, putting it back together, worked on the cornice, worked on the second floor window, restoring that.
Did you break in as a child to the garden?
You didn't need to break in.
I want to
Yeah.
know if you had a dog.
We did have a dog, but we had a big backyard.
Oh,
Honestly, letting your dog, Hammond Harwood House. Oh, there's something so wrong with that.
good.
Anyway, the dog's not to blame.
I'm glad to hear that.
So that's it from me.
All right. So I'd like to point out one thing, again, separating this into for the commissioners, the fact that a private owner is willing to take on maintaining and improving the city sidewalk shouldn't be ignored. And so that's really important. Commissioners, do you have any comments on the paving concept and the changes on the paving, the widening of any of the paving towards the house? I personally find that completely compliant. Yes, Bobby.
I have no problem with the paving at all or the bricks or anything that's being chosen. I just am curious why the Hammond Harwood is working on, for a large part of it, a city sidewalk. And does the city have a role in this, or can they help in some way?
Yeah, I don't have an answer for that. Barbara or
Well, I
Shelley?
do. I
Okay,
do.
right.
It's the city is working toward trying to fix level the city sidewalks, and actually have a decent contractor who might even be good for this. However, they tend to do a block at a time. So I don't know where this one fits into the schedule. Right now, they're on Charles Street between Cathedral Street and Duke of Gloucester. And
Ooh, we
these
should pay
people-
attention. That's a different topic. We should pay attention to where they are.
well, so let me tell you their process so that
I'm sorry. We can talk about that later. We
Well,
can
this
talk
is
about
the,
later.
part of the reason I'm saying this is because they actually pull out the paving stones, and you can get them to reset them at any height.
Yeah.
So
But we don't want to burden
paving
this applicant with that discussion, but it's a great discussion for a future meeting if they're
Well,
going around.
All right, I'll talk to Shelley about it separately, but
Yeah.
you can adjust the very high height of a paving stone with the right person.
Okay. Yeah, I was wondering if the city had a role, if they could help at all with getting the bricks that they're looking to get. You know,
Well, sure.
if there was some
That is
assistance they
what
could
I'm
get.
working on.
Or
Right.
shift their schedule to help the Hammond Harwood House.
Yeah.
I'm open to any of that. If I can save the Hammond Harwood House any time or trouble, I will.
If they want it, if they want it.
Since we're spending some time talking about this, may I ask John a question? John, it's my understanding as a homeowner that I'm responsible for the sidewalk, that I have to pay for any repair and maintenance unless the city does something like want to install a drain or some utility. And so I would think, following from that fact, that the Hammond Harwood House is responsible for this sidewalk, even though it's in the public right of way. Would I be mistaken?
Well, certainly they can reset the bricks, they can level them, and so on with approval. But I believe that it's gone back and forth, and now the city is responsible for sidewalks. And part of the reason that the city wants to reset bricks in the historic district is because they're a tripping hazard.
Oh, yeah, very
Trying
much.
to eliminate that. So they're they have, and Shelley was helpful with this. Shelley had a standard that was established for Cornhill Street. And so I showed that standard to the contractor and the public works people, and they're going to do both sides of Charles Street, and they've also done in front of the Upton Scott House,
Oh,
which is long overdue.
yeah, yes.
So
Well,
That's my
good.
understanding.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah,
That
that's my
clarifies.
understanding as well, that in front of our house, except for where your driveway is, you're responsible weirdly for your driveway entry, but the city is responsible for everything else. All right, any other comments on the paving and the widening, and it all seems to make sense for gathering visitors? All right.
Kim, to my eye, since everything in the Georgian period, and this is such a marvelous example of the Georgian period, puts great importance on proportion. This seems to all be in proportion, which means that to me, it just looks like it's always been there, like it belongs. So I'm happy with that.
Okay, on the paving comments, any other commissioners have thoughts?
No, thank you.
All right. On the plantings, which involve the ferns and vinca and vinca major, any thoughts? So I'll quickly tee it up, and Shelley, correct me if I'm wrong. You're replacing just grass with a combination of the ferns close to the house, vinca major close to the house, and vinca minor closer to the sidewalk.
That's correct. And we weren't saying that we thought this front was formally planted, because we don't know. We don't have any plans. And I think there's no way to know, but we don't want to keep the grass, and we don't want to return it to dirt, which basically means we want ground cover, and we want evergreen ground cover so it's not dormant all winter. And we want it to be healthy and lush, and we want it to be simple and clean, and we want it to be plants that would have been used during earlier times, but we were never really saying that we thought this was planted like this originally during the period of significance, because we just don't know. But we're trying to use plants that were used in gardens during that time.
Okay. Any again, here we are with our guidelines talking about the guidelines don't use the term native plants yet. But the guidelines talk about they should be in scale, basically, is what the guidelines talk about. And that was C1. And that's about it. We don't really specify massing, and it's funny. I'll make a editorial comment. We make comments in the guidelines right now that make sure that they don't grow too high. So it's pretty funny. So you've chosen plants that won't obscure the building, right? I mean, Shelley, they're not going to be large or.
Yes, we've kept them low intentionally so that everything's visible and we're not distracting the view of the front facade with foundation planting shrubs.
Mm-hmm.
We've also chosen the native ferns because it's just very dark in those hyphens on the north side. So we want something that has a little bit of height and texture and life, but that won't get, more than probably 18, 24 inches high. The vinca major is partly selected because there's that very large Magnolia grandiflora with roots. You probably have all seen it. And there's just not a lot of plants that will grow with essentially no soil. So we're trying to balance out all of those different goals. But really what we are going for is just a very quiet textured, proud front lawn that's in good health and looks cared for.
Commissioners, any comments?
I think these are a good choice. I mean, if nothing else, it takes away the worry of having to keep a lawn up and water a lawn and mow a lawn, and still provides a lovely entrance to the property.
I think it's a very informed and practical solution, given the fact that, to my knowledge at least, a townhouse of this relatively modest size isn't going to have much of a front yard. A formal garden would be where it was placed, in the back. And even if you took a contemporary London townhouse, it's not going to have a big front yard unless there's sufficient space to wall it and formalize it with pathways and, you know, accents and all of that. So there's not real, I'm not aware of a real good precedent for this small size at this time. And I think this is just a very good practical solution. And the applicants have a very clear idea of the choices that they've had to make and what works best.
Yeah.
Okay, so what I'm hearing is the commissioner saying these are appropriate choice of plants and they don't have any adverse impact on the very significant building. All right, and the last thing is the posts and chain concept. Any other commissioners have a thought about to surround this landscaping?
I should point out that the post and chain we were taking from the King George Street and wrapping just one length back at the lead walks, not the whole way to the door. So you can see this little, it's kind of hard to read here, but it's really just that front edge that we're suggesting using that.
How high are the posts and will the chain be when it's installed?
It will, I don't know why this isn't changing. It would be about 12 inches high. Or I have 14 inches high. This is the current sketch.
Oh, I see. Okay, thank you.
So really, after you subtract out 6 to 8 inches of ground cover, you're really just gonna, you're not even really gonna barely see it. I think you'll see it, but you know, sometimes it'll be a little more, depends on what period you are with the ground cover, you know how gardens are. Sometimes it might be a little bit more visible and other times less with the ground cover. But we're really just, I think, refined homes have clearly defined edges. And so we're just trying to give that sidewalk a definitive edge.
I hate to do this, but you know, I used to give walking tours of the historical architecture downtown, and I can tell you that I'm glad that this was not in place during the time that I was doing it. I'm sure that at least once I would have tripped over it. I would have been looking across the street to make some comparison, and you know, taking that half step back and been on my backside on your lawn. So I wonder if you've taken any measure of how that might affect these many visitors that come by and mill around and aren't always paying attention to where they're stepping.
I guess I would say it's 8 inches back from the sidewalk, and we're talking about turning a brick, you know, on the edge. So it's not right at the edge of the sidewalk, and there's a couple of different visual cues, but anything's possible.
Okay. Oh yeah, somebody's going to trip over it someday, sometime, but I'm just raising the issue because it seemed to be one that would have affected me if I were still doing the tours.
Yeah. Do we know of any other examples of this in the historic district where it's currently installed?
There's a chain catenary fence in front of, I don't know what you call it. We call it Miss Lucy's Bake Shop at the corner of East Street and Prince George Street.
Oh, okay.
The Clausen's house. As far as I'm
Larry,
concerned, this is the least important part of the whole project. It's just a signifier for basically people with dogs, which is a huge problem for us.
You should have said that up front. I wouldn't even raise the question.
Yeah.
So I have a question about, because there's a picture that shows this on there, like what was can we estimate the height from that picture at all?
Those were taller.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Anyone? I'll chime in. If no one else, other commissioners. Yeah, this feature concerns me in terms of adverse impact on the building itself. For one thing, I know that it might have existed in the past, but I do think it detracts from the building. Also, frankly, the concept of a chain in front of a building really strikes me as the tone that it doesn't. I would not want you to do. So.
Yeah, I'm perfectly willing to strike this from the project. And we kind of struggled with what, if anything, to signify, please don't walk here. Please don't trample this. Please don't let your dog do his business on this. But hopefully if it looks good enough and there is enough space for people to gather, then we won't really need it. But I don't think anyone here feels that is the most essential part of what we're trying to do.
Okay.
If you don't mind, may I ask, at the corners where the walk changes direction to go up towards the house, would it be a consideration simply to put one or two pieces there to keep people from packing that corner down? Would that be a consideration?
I mean, we could do that. I don't, as Barbara says, I don't think this was ever considered, the lead key element. I kind of see it as a positive kind of detail that just builds that edge. I don't really feel like the chain is saying, negative connotation, but it's good to talk about these things because it's different for different people. So it's also something that, we could reconstruct the whole streetscape. And if it turned out those corners got worn down, this could be sort of a back pocket detail to come back with. These could be put in at any time because they're just, little footings. So I guess if this is the stumbling block, I think we'd love to be able to move ahead with the rest of the project and not get, caught on a detail that we're not caught on to begin with.
We would never want to be a stumbling block.
We really are just trying to get the project moving because it's been very difficult process to do a very simple repair.
Well, we're trying to, hopefully we weren't part of that. We're not trying to be part of that process, but so any other comments? I think there are three, again, I'm going to summarize then. There are three aspects to this project. The paving, which all the commissioners, I believe, agreed or was compliant with guidelines. All the plantings, including the closer to the house ferns and the vinca, the two types of vinca, major and minor, all seem to be compliant with guidelines. And then the last discussion had to do with the steel posts and chains, which we had a discussion about, and in terms of adverse impact on the building, were considered. I specifically said it, but I think generally the commissioners felt that was unnecessary. Maybe that's the best way to put it. Other commissioners, is that in terms of my summary, the best way to put it? I'm looking for guidance for you.
Yes.
Yeah.
Great.
It's fine.
All right. So in that case, this application, it seems to be, it is feasible. It does need to go to public hearing because I looked through in great detail. I looked through the administrative guidelines, and this type of application does need to go to a public hearing. So we look forward to that public hearing. Any questions? Shelley?
I don't think so. We appreciate your time and feedback and look forward to September coming back. for the
All right.
hearing.
Thank you. All right. Next on the agenda, Eric. Has Eric joined us?
Yes, I'm letting his team in now.
Hi, everyone. Thanks.
Hello, Eric.
Um,
Hi, Eric.
hey.
Hello. Is that Casey?
yeah.
Hi, Casey.
Yeah, Casey and
Leahy here.
Elad.
Ella.
Yeah. I guess I can dive right in here.
Well, let me welcome you. Let me welcome you
Sure.
first. And introduce, perhaps Eric, you can introduce yourself because I'm not sure the other commissioners have met you yet, and introduce your colleagues.
Yeah, of course. Thank you. Thank you, Tim. Eric Leshinsky, Chief of Comprehensive Planning in the Department of Planning and Zoning. I sit right next to John. And this might be the first time I presented to the board. So thanks for having us. I'm glad we could fit this in. And I'm here with Casey Ortiz, who's a comprehensive planner in our Division of Planning and Zoning. And then Elad Nichols Kaufman is our summer intern from St. John's College.
Welcome.
Who's also been involved in the plan. So let me go ahead and share my screen.
Let me tee it up a little bit.
Sure.
Sorry.
Oh, sure. Of course. Sorry.
Yeah. So I think most of the commissioners are aware of the comprehensive planning process, and it's been going on for a while. And can you tell us a little bit about the process you've gone through with the public and other commissions, and how we have ended up, you in your professional experience have ended up where we are right now. So can you give us a little bit of background before you just, so tell us why we're here and where we are in your process.
Yeah, no problem. So some of this is in the presentation for sure,
Okay.
but
All right.
We've been working. It's a good point to give just a bit of an overview. We've been working on this comprehensive plan for about 3 years. It's something that we're required by the state to do every 10 years in line with the census data that is released and updated. COVID certainly threw our timeline off significantly. The process I started before I was on board here. I started in July 2020, started in 2019. So, the process included a lot of community engagement all over the city. It changed dramatically during COVID, and after COVID, we were back to some in-person meetings and going directly to communities. We did meet with boards and commissions along the way. I believe some folks from HPC were involved at the beginning when Dr. Nash was leading the process, and I inherited work that was done at that point and some of the comments received. But we've done a whole range of surveying of residents and other city stakeholders and talking to lots of stakeholders directly. I've had several conversations directly with Historic Annapolis, business owners, institutions, and the resulting draft comprehensive plan is the outcome of and can't really overstate how many conversations we've had. So we have a lot of content in the plan that kind of talks about our process, but
thanks. And if you could just, as I met you in the parking garage a few weeks ago, if tonight, can you just help us focus on what aspects of the comprehensive plan that have to do with preservation and cultural history? So, and as it is highlighted in the comprehensive plan, that would be really helpful.
Absolutely. Yeah. The presentation is tailored to that, but also providing some context to the historic district, because there are things happening around the historic district that are relevant in the way we're looking at other areas of the city, and some of the broader policies I think will have some impact on the historic district. So the presentation is not just simply focused on the discrete boundaries of the district, but I think you'll find it helpful to see some of this other context. So
look forward to it. Thanks.
Yeah, sure thing. Okay, let me go to the presentation now. All right, see my screen here? They have not come up yet. Is the first slide visible?
Yes, thanks.
Okay, good. Yeah, I made a delay. What you're looking at on this slide is the cover of the draft plan that was just released on June 15th at the Planning Commission. And we've been really on kind of a road show trying to get the plan in front of as many different groups as possible that have specific interests that should be addressed in this plan. And I'm happy to be here to talk about historic and cultural preservation issues in the plan. I just want to go through some boilerplate stuff. This is really content that I think everybody should be aware of. I think as you kind of your ambassadors for HPC and the city, I think hearing some of the frequently asked questions could be valuable. So, how long is the draft Annapolis Ahead 2040 document open for review? 90 days. Mentioned we started June 15th and technically end September 14th, but in actuality, it'll end the second Planning Commission meeting of September is September 22nd. And that's where it'll have its final public hearing. Will there be more chances to learn about Annapolis Ahead? Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we have this dedicated website, AnnapolisAhead2040.com, where there's a range of accessible information about the plan. And that's really the best place for anyone to go. But we continue to schedule events around this. We've done 4 in-person meetings recently. We just wrapped up over the last 2 weeks. In fact, the last one was at the West Street Library and was aimed at Ward 1 and Ward 2. And there was a very large participation from the historic district, it seemed, recognized a lot of folks. And we are planning 2 more in-person meetings in early September that will both happen at the Pip Moyer Recreation Center. So one will be a weekday evening and the other will be on a Saturday. And those are for anybody who hasn't been able to meet us in person. We have a lot of blown up maps and large present exhibits on display at those events. So how can you give feedback? Well, a lot of folks have been submitting comments through the website where we have comment links. We also get comments directly from email to both Casey and myself. We've been getting comments from council members who share comments that come from constituents. We've been really getting them from all angles. Good comments so far. Are you planning to meet with 70 civic associations, HOAs, neighborhood groups, et cetera? We absolutely are. In fact, we have a number that are already scheduled, that have already happened. We're meeting with the Ward 1 Residents Association on August 8th. And we have a few other neighborhood groups lined up as well. But if any of you represent other groups in the city beyond HPC and would like to schedule a presentation, please reach out to us and we'd be happy to do that. And then what happens after the 90-day review period ends? Well, we as planning staff are gathering all the comments into a formal comment log. We're going to respond to those comments and we're going to share that with the Planning Commission, and they're going to make a recommendation on this plan that then goes to City Council for an adoption process, which is somewhat hard to predict. It's up to the City Council how to run that process. It could take several months, but ultimately, we would hope to have an adopted comprehensive plan. And this is just a visual for what that process looks like. Here we are in the 90-day comment period. Every 2 weeks at the Planning Commission's meetings, there's an open public hearing on the comprehensive plan. So folks can submit comments in written form or deliver live testimony. Next meeting is August 3rd, next Thursday. We're just doing a whole broad range of public outreach during this process, and then the City Council adoption process starts. More realistically, it'll probably be in October. Interesting factoid here. This is an unusual process. It's guided by the state code. It's not initiated by our City Council. So the Planning Commission is really tasked with shepherding this process by state code. And we follow the state code closely. It really has determined a lot of what needs to be in the comprehensive plan, as well as the process for producing the plan and getting it to an adoption. That's just background. I mentioned AnnapolisHead2040.com is our dedicated website address for this draft plan review. And if you go to that, it'll first direct you to the city's website where we've been documenting our process for the last several years. There's this blue button that says review the draft plan. And if you click on that, it takes you to a new website that is really exclusively focused on this review process and the 90-day public review. And you click on this gray button and you'll be able to download the whole document PDF. It's about 30 megs. We also have printed copies at the libraries and at the City Council chambers at City Hall. There's some videos on specific content that we want to emphasize in the plan. If you scroll down through that website, TV Studio at the city has been very helpful in producing that content. So I want to thank Madeline especially, and there's a few more videos that we're going to be rolling out. If you keep scrolling down through that website, we've broken out each chapter into a separate tab you can click on. There's a comment link. You can download that individual chapter. The very bottom of the website is an updated calendar of events that we are changing as new events come online. Now to get into the plan itself. So the structure hasn't changed much over the last few years. We have these three foundational sections: the thriving city, the functional city, the adaptive city. I suppose you could say that's our spin on the structure of this plan to sort of make it an Annapolis plan, beyond what the state requires. Most of the chapters in here are required by the state, with the exception of arts and culture, which does focus on a lot of historic and cultural preservation. I'm going to talk about that. I'm really proud that I believe this is the first comprehensive plan the city's produced that has a dedicated arts and culture chapter. Seems appropriate. We've been a cultural center for over 300 years. And I think there's a lot we can still be doing to improve on that, and certainly a lot to acknowledge. These appendices are all documents that planning studies that have happened along the way that have informed the plan. in terms of goals and recommended actions. It's another source of content. And some of these were task forces that were initiated by city council. They weren't part of a comprehensive plan process, but they focused on topics that were really relevant to the comprehensive plan, like the maritime industry, for example. So we followed the process.
It's a little hard to read. I can see
Oh,
demographic and
yeah.
just there you go. Now we can read it. Thank you.
Okay, sure. So all of these appendices are linked on the website. If you scroll down to the appendices tab, there's hyperlinks for these, and you can take a look at any of them. The thing about historic and cultural preservation, the historic district in general, in regard to this plan, that I think is really important to acknowledge is that it's woven throughout this plan. I mean that in the most genuine respect. I mean, it is something that clearly defines our city. It's beyond the historic district. We have an emphasis on that in almost every chapter. There's a few concentrations of content, I would say, in the arts and culture chapter in particular. But we have dedicated goals to the historic district in the land use chapter. I'm going to talk about these dedicated goals in arts and culture in that chapter, and then as well in the environmental sustainability chapter. So it's something that's threaded throughout. I think in terms of a structure, we were looking for themes, kind of cross-cutting themes that would relate citywide. You know, if you're wondering why we don't have a section in bright color that says the historic city, well, partly it's because a large percent of the city is not historic, and we were looking for themes for sort of these big headings that would be broadly applicable to the city as a whole and every neighborhood in the city, every community. So when you go into the first section, it's the introduction and demographic trends. The introduction is somewhat like an executive summary. It provides a whole range of overview for the plan. It's a great thing to read first. And the very first page talks about equity, health, and resilience being the underlying themes of this plan. Every goal and recommended action reinforces these themes, if not all three, a couple of them, or at least one of them. And, you know, these are themes of the moment for Annapolis. They're all really relevant to challenges that we've faced in the last few years. You know, within health, I think it's ultimately about how can we design a city that improves our health rather than worsens it. And we can be very deliberate, as you all know, in how we design our city. I think another cross-cutting theme that you're going to see throughout is simply how can we take some of the lessons learned from the historic district and apply them to other parts of Annapolis. That's something I'm going to be coming back to throughout. I would acknowledge that when I feel discouraged about things that are happening in other parts of the city, decisions that are being made or changes, and I do fall back on the historic district and the way that the district has been able to adapt over the centuries. And many of the goals that we have in this plan are very visible in the historic district today. I'll talk about that in some of these other chapters, but we have images throughout this plan that I'm happy to say are really also of this moment. They capture Annapolis the last couple of years, primarily. We want them to be relevant. This is the Juneteenth parade, the inaugural Juneteenth parade from 2 years ago. One of the few, maybe the only one that goes the other way, goes up Main Street rather than down Main Street. We talk about how to use this plan in this chapter. It's important that it's
Excuse me, Eric. I don't mean to interrupt, but I
no, go for it.
can you help us as the role of our commission to focus on a little bit more? You're talking about the historic district, but can you also talk about the role of preservation and where in the plan preservation is discussed? I think you mentioned two or three sections. I just can we focus a little bit on where land use? You said in land use was one. So
Yeah,
down in the plan,
let me jump ahead. I'll jump ahead.
So comprehensive plans have like layers, right? They have like there you go. We're into the thriving city, and so can we drill down land use? You mentioned as one. So if you could tell us where preservation is mentioned in land use. I think you mentioned another. So can you help us?
Absolutely.
Drill down because I personally read it and don't see the word preservation mentioned much. So that'll be some feedback that we'll provide later. But can you tell us where in the plan, land use, for instance, where is preservation, cultural preservation, historic preservation mentioned or discussed, and recommendations that have to do with the next step for the city for the next 16 years, actually?
Sure. So I'll jump ahead to land use. We take cues from the historic district and our municipal growth chapter. I won't go into it, but really the kind of infill development that we're looking for is the kind that we've been having in the historic district for years. That fits seamlessly into its surrounding context. I'll get into some of the just to try to identify preservation explicitly is mentioned in land use. I'm trying to figure out where, I'm going to jump ahead to, so some of this is hard to convey without giving a little bit more context. So there's a huge emphasis on infill redevelopment in the city in this comprehensive plan, essentially looking at previously developed sites. What a kind of better site could be.
Well, let me help you a little bit.
Yeah.
Preservation is beyond just the historic district. So we as a Historic Preservation Commission are only focused on the historic district. But how about cultural preservation, like sites within the city that are important to preserve? I mean,
I'll jump ahead. I think to get to the heart of what you're asking for, I'll jump ahead to the arts and culture chapter. That's where you're going to find, there's a ton of content here that I think is relevant, but I think to get to your question, when we talk about the historic district in this comprehensive plan, we're talking about preservation in a broader sense than just architectural preservation. We are too. Yeah. So that's where I think, like in our housing chapter, we talk a lot about the kind of housing patterns that predominate in the downtown and Eastport areas where we have historic housing stock. The emphasis is not necessarily on preserving that stock. A lot of these typologies could not be produced today. And so there are strong recommendations for how to change our zoning code to allow for the sort of sensible housing types that historically have defined Annapolis. This spread is essentially all about that. And most of these housing types could not be produced today based on our current zoning code. So we talk about neighborhood preservation. It sort of starts with what type of buildings are we going to allow that could kind of extend the historic development patterns that have defined Annapolis. We do get into short-term rentals, and there's clear ramifications for how these impact neighborhood character and preservation in the downtown area. And we talk about that here. You can't really have the historic quality of a neighborhood without having long-term residents. We put a lot of emphasis on, if we are going to have short-term rentals and we think there's value to those, we want to prioritize the ones that are owner-occupied, rather than, say, a situation where an out-of-town investor buys a property with the express intent of dedicating it to a short-term rental use.
Yes, that's
the difference.
That's
So-
one,
Yeah.
Where
So
is that?
that's-
Is that stated?
Yeah, so that's in this this spread here on short-term rentals. This is from the housing chapter. And so when you go into the kind of the recommended action, it is explicitly to change our short-term rental standard to prioritize owner-occupied short-term rentals, and for both affordability and neighborhood preservation. I think that's the exact phrasing of it.
Well, that's relevant to the historic district. By the way,
Um,
thank you, but any other?
I'm going to come back
Other
to these.
commissioners comment as we're talking about these things?
Yeah, go for it.
Since
I'll
you
go
asked, Tim, I'd like to ask Eric a very, very broad question, maybe too broad. Having participated in the previous 4 iterations of the comprehensive plan, the development and presentation and authorization of them, it seems that the historic district has always gotten less attention than its significance to the city deserves. But I've always, in the end, come to the conclusion that that's because compared to the rest of the city, it is more homogeneous and has more eyes closely watching what happens within it, i.e. us.
Right.
And so the kind of broad issues that you're saying are weaved into the plan, that's typically been my experience. It's not singled out. It's not given its own chapter. It's not deeply analyzed, because there's always at least an assumption that things may not be perfect. They may not be ideal, but they're well managed, and this historic district's not going to fall apart. Right? Am I being fairly close that you're? I guess what I'm asking you is, there's not a lot of places where you can point and say, well, if you look at page 37, paragraph 3, under this heading, we talk about historic preservation. Am I right?
Actually, no.
Oh,
I should have
good.
led. I should have led with this chapter. I mean, I think we've been giving a lot of presentations that to all kinds of different audiences, and I think having some context to the overriding themes is important. But I think you'll find in this chapter, arts and culture, a pretty substantial coverage of the historic district and preservation in general. And I would say that, I can't really speak to how past plans have treated. I mean, I'm familiar with past comprehensive plans, but not necessarily the process behind them. I would say in this one, why there might not be, I'm personally confident that when you actually look at this chapter and some of the other references to preservation, it will be far and away more than what you've seen in other comprehensive plans. But why it may be woven throughout is really just that aspect I mentioned earlier, that it's a discrete part of the city. It's has an oversized influence on the city. There's really no other part of the city that has dedicated goals in this plan to the degree that the historic district has. But this is the chapter where we talk about preservation more broadly. I mean, we start with this exhibit, this image of the exhibit at the Museum of Historic Annapolis, which is really telling. I mean, I think I highlight this a lot because the theme of this chapter is really on how we're going to diversify and broaden the conversation around preservation in the city. And there's so multiple narratives that need to be told that haven't really been given enough credence in the past. And this exhibit, I think sets the standard. And so I really tell people to go check this out. And it's the civil rights area in Annapolis. It was interesting. I was presenting to the Art and Public Places Commission on Tuesday night, and David Arthur, the vice chair, said, "Well, that's my brother in that image." So the relevance is remarkable, even today, to people who live here. But in this chapter, we talk broadly about the arts community and the creative economy. But when we get into talking about, this is all kind of focused on the arts ecology of the city. But this is where we bring up historic and cultural preservation. We have a spread that really frames what we mean by this. And we highlight a number of projects that are happening today or in the very near future. They're all active projects at different stages of preservation. You're familiar with all of them, I presume. The Hoppy Adams House, perhaps not. That's a exciting project that John Tower.
We're all aware of that.
Yeah. Okay, good. The Cars Beach property, it's probably not something that you've perhaps not received a presentation on, but it's a huge
Again,
success.
I hope we're all aware of that.
Yeah. It's not, I think the interesting about that project is that it cuts across a lot of categories in this plan. It's both community facility, it's in that chapter, it's a preservation project, it's an environmental sustainability and water resources project. It sort of checks the boxes in all kinds of ways. And it's indicative, I think, of how the preservation projects in the future are going to be doing a variety of things. They're going to provide a variety of benefits, not just their immediate neighborhood context, but citywide. I think in this section, we actually, we do have a spread that's dedicated to the historic district. And we talk about issues that are maybe a little bit more nuanced than the treatment in the past, which may have been more specifically about architectural preservation or climate change. But we do get into, what, when we're talking about major infrastructure, the importance of undergrounding utilities. We talk about the importance of mobility options in the historic district to sort of offset the impact that the car has today and has had over time. We talk about in this last paragraph here, the idea that housing and neighborhood preservation really relies on bringing more residents, long-term residents, into the historic district. And how can we activate more of the underutilized units, residential units, in the historic district and the broader downtown. So these are difficult issues to resolve, for sure, but they're, I believe, really critical to the resilience of the historic district. Certainly the City Dock project takes some precedence here, but this is where we kind of dedicate full spread to the historic district. After that, we talk about an expanded focus on preservation geographically, and I'll talk about these two.
Eric, could I interrupt real quick?
Sure.
Is there a way on that previous topic you talk about to incentivizing the use of the upper stories of these commercial buildings?
Yeah.
For housing, you talk about, I think affordable housing is a theme in the plan.
Yeah, that's sort of the benefit of.
Have you been able to put something in the plan that says we recommend incentives, city incentives for landowners, property owners to use that? So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, we have a specific recommendation on that. Let me find it here. It's in the land use chapter. I think it's cross-referenced in this chapter, let me see something here. Might be.
Go ahead and put it right in there.
We have, so under arts and culture, goal 4, enhance the sustainability of the historic district through multifaceted approach to district-wide improvements.
I lose it when you say arts and culture, but okay.
It's, well, the one I wanted to point out, it's in land use, and I think it's in housing as well. Let's see here, sorry. Explore expansion of the current historic tax credit budget with priority offered to projects to activate upper floors with moderately priced dwelling units. So you can see it's also listed in Chapter 4 land use under goal land use 5, LU5. I've had a number of conversations with Alderwoman Tierney about this. She's very, actually, the recommended action above here, enact legislation that compels property owners within the historic district, prioritizing those on Main Street, to update sprinkler systems by 2028. We've had a number of conversations about the fire code being kind of a primary impediment to some of these upper floors being activated. And when those investments are made, how can we make sure that some of those units are more affordable for other income brackets? And I think the way we the way we distribute the tax credits and other loan financing is one of the primary means that we've discussed. So that's what's referenced here. But I think we could probably I will double check the wording in the land use chapter, but I think we could be maybe a little more explicit about the revolving loan fund. I think
you answered my question. That's wonderful to see that.
Yeah.
So I would say don't explore it. I would say enact it.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I mean, I think that in our housing chapter, and we put a significant amount of emphasis on trying to emulate some of the housing conditions.
It's a typo.
Oh, we could use all the
multifaceted.
Where do you see that?
Upper left there, multifaceted. Through a multifaceted.
Oh, great, too. Thanks. Thank you. So there's a lot of lessons to be learned from the historic district and downtown in general that we could apply to other places in the city, but there's also things that we could be doing better in the historic district. And I think that's one of the takeaways here. But
I guess a big takeaway here is, if you go back there for the other commissioners, I would encourage us to look at that chapter that we just saw there.
I can share this presentation. There's a few other places I can go back to in the presentation where I highlight the goals that are specific to the historic district. If not broadly about preservation, they're very specific to the historic district. So I can go back to those as well. But, to your comment initially about preservation, I mean, this is this recommendation is a signature idea with this comprehensive plan, and that is to focus, as we're focusing outside of the historic district in the future on other preservation initiatives, to treat the old Fourth Ward, the Clay Street area, and portion of the parole community as preservation focus areas, meaning that there are existing historic sites in these communities that are in various stages of protection or restoration. And there could be more done. The Hoppy Adams House is obviously a major opportunity in the parole area, but there's excuse me, I'm blanking on. There's a Rosenwald School in the parole community that's currently used as apartments. We have a recommendation in this to develop a strategy for when we can preserve that or turn it into something that can share its history better than it does today. how we could do that. So these are sort of the focused areas. I would love your input on whether this makes sense. I've actually gone so far as to reach out to Maryland Historic Trust with an idea that's in here about creating a African American Heritage District designation, which is something that I think, as I've traveled around the state and visited other cities that have historic African American neighborhoods, you will find discrete buildings preserved, but not the sense of neighborhood that maybe once was there. You could say in Easton, the Hill community is an example.
Yes, I'm quite involved in all of those.
Yeah. So, I broached the idea with Nell at Maryland Historic Trust, and,
I honor that very much and agree with it. I completely agree with that, and I think that we should do that. But I think in the interest of, I'm telegraphing Will here, saying like our focus, right? This is, you're absolutely right about that, and we should do that as citizens, all of us. But in terms of of the historic district, what are I think you've shown us specifically the aspects of the plan that have to do with the historic district. In terms of actions that you would be recommending for the historic district, can you help us focus on those? And are they just in one section, or climate vulnerability? There you go.
Yeah. I mean, that's really the essence of this presentation.
I would believe preservation should be in every section of the plan.
Yeah, I mean, it is. I mean, it was a tough question. I'll be honest with you. It's a 415-page document, and I've been kind of, eating, sleeping, and breathing for a while. I think to basically pull out that particular word is tough for me to do at this moment. But I will say that what I think you're asking about in terms of the intent of preservation is pretty much in every chapter. I would say, in this chapter on environmental sustainability and the emphasis on climate vulnerability, there's obviously.
I'm terrible at wonderful or terrible, but that says predictions, not predictions.
I appreciate it.
It says predictions.
Thank you.
I have a weird ability to do this, but
not weird. I do the same, and I'm glad your eyes are on this. But because the historic district is really our most vulnerable place for impacts from climate change, sea level rise, storm surge, et cetera. There's quite a bit of emphasis here, obviously. A lot is already underway, but we're going to have to continue to monitor the outcome of the improvements we make, and are they doing enough? And are they, what are the other consequences that maybe we didn't anticipate? And so the environmental sustainability chapter talks quite a bit about that.
Does it talk about the impact on historic structures at all?
It does. I'm trying to think offhand. It may not. It gets into, I think, some of the recommended actions. I think it maybe speaks more in generalities about, there have been past plans that have looked in far greater detail at the historic district. Most recently, the so-called CRIMP, the Cultural Resource Hazard Mitigation Plan from 2018. There's some great recommendations from these.
Perhaps it doesn't mention them specifically. It possibly could.
It might benefit from having more mention. I'd say, when there's been a plan that addresses historic structures in more detail, we tend to reference that. So this would be a good place to look at, I think.
So is it referenced?
I don't know offhand
There you
where
go.
the.
There's another comment
Yeah,
from me.
that would be a great comment.
Yeah, this is all general. So
Yeah.
that's all general.
Well, this is a different topic. I'm just kind of scrolling through to the stuff that I think will, the whole point of including this in the presentation is that, there's a lot of talk about minimizing the city's carbon footprint in the future. And I think the point to make is that our sort of most mixed use districts, such as the historic district and the downtown area in general, are kind of the model for how we can do that. I mean, these are places that are built compactly and connected, where you can get around without a vehicle, automobile. There's lessons that we're taking from the historic district, again, for what we need to do citywide to meet some of these goals. But this is something that you're going to be interested in, I think. I mean, we're going to be seeing more curbside charging stations in the future, and on private property as well. And I can't say how many we might see in the historic district, but these will come up. And I think this is going to be an issue as the city adapts to electric mobility. That's going to have impacts to the historic district. And we don't have specific recommendations on how to broach this per se in the historic district, except
They're
individual
applications. So
right.
So I don't mean to speak for all the other commissioners, but as they come up, we will see applications.
Right. So this is just something to be aware of, I think.
If we could just tone the color down, it might help.
You mean of the green?
How about Texaco red? Remember the Texaco signs with the red?
Yeah, so we'll deal with these. We have code and we have guidelines that deal with utility stuff. So
good.
Eric, do you think it's been hard in your discussions with these different groups about the city and its future to get them to even agree what historic preservation means and how that concept or that issue should be addressed in different parts of the city?
No, actually, I think there's a incredible thirst for, well, let me say it in two ways. There's an incredible thirst for more preservation work in other parts of the city, but without necessarily understanding the full extent that might include at times. I think it is unlikely that we will have a historic district similar to the one we have today in another part of the city, for reasons that relate to the challenges for property owners to make updates and such, and frankly, to manage it in the way that John Tower and other staff do. But there's a desire to find some sort of, I would say, a spectrum of what historic preservation could mean that maybe is less involved than what you see in the historic district, but has a lot of the benefits that come from that.
I'm glad to hear you. I'm glad to hear you say that, because when I think about the struggles of a planner like yourself today, or us, in watching out over the historic district, the idea of what history is important is clearly an explosive issue in our country today, and different communities that have every right and it's perfectly understandable that they want their history preserved, are multiplying, and they do not understand, just as you said, they don't understand what goes into creating a district to honor a certain culture or a certain era of history. It costs a lot, it takes a lot of time, and it takes a lot of people. So I guess in a way, I'm very pleased as a Annapolitan to hear that it's being talked about. But I'm not surprised. I'm not really disappointed either, but I'm not surprised that you don't have a resolution for that yet. Because we can't even resolve what we want to do in Annapolis with the historic district.
Right.
I don't think.
I mean, that idea for the African American Heritage District really came out of many conversations I had with the parole community, specifically, Alderwoman Pendel Charles, who, I agree. We have been struggling with sort of how to create a level of distinction for that area that it deserves without putting the sort of constraints on property owners.
Right.
That's exactly it. That's
it's, on the one hand, there's extreme fears of gentrification and property value escalation, but also this desire to acknowledge and identify these important sites. And so I think that the best strategy we've come up with is sort of this district designation, but also some emphasis on some of the specific public institutions that are in the neighborhood or that could be public institutions. So the Hoppy Adams House, potentially the Rosenwald School site, the Parole Health Center.
Eric, I would remind you that the city did designate the Parole Health Center as a site. So there is precedent for that.
That's true.
So
I didn't even know there was a Rosenwald School in Pearl, but there
is a Rosenwald School. It's a little
That's
it's a little apartment building. Yeah. And there was one and about where the library is in Hillsmere.
Yeah.
In Annapolis, and of course there's one in Eastport.
I did not know of that, Tim.
Yes. Well, I'm a Rosenwald School person. I'm involved in the project. So the Eastport, there's an Eastport school as well. So we've broadened the topic beyond the historic district, which is our job here in terms of preservation, HPC, but we're talking about the broader topic of preservation in Annapolis, and John's office is involved in preservation beyond the historic district, and so that should be all through this plan. So,
and let me say, I am really enjoying these projects. They are important. They're in their infancy. The Hoppy Adams House is really just getting ready to take off that project, and it's going to be fantastic. The Rosenwald School is that is the one that is in Parole. That's going to be tough.
Well, I'll be able to jump right in there. There's a larger countywide project on Rosenwald schools that's a part of. So we don't. There's great resources going towards that already. So we don't need to duplicate that effort.
But then within the historic district, we have just finished an adaptive use of the Maynard Burgess House. And of course, the way that is going to be presented is going to be relevant to its early occupants.
Sure.
And so that's going to be contained within that building. And then the Universal Lodge 14 on Clay Street is just winding down. So there are more opportunities out there to tell the story.
Yep. Celebrating the past and preserving what we have is important. So we'd like to see that throughout the plan.
To John, I think I just wanted to piggyback on something that John just mentioned about the Maynard Burgess House, that early on in my time in this role, I became familiar. There's a new grant program from the Maryland State Arts Council that's focused on conservation of arts, conservation arts, I should say. It's actually aimed at more at preserving existing public art around the state. But in talking to the person who administers that program, he suggested an interesting idea that is somewhere, I'm trying to find the recommendation, but the idea of, when it comes to interpretation at some of these sites, of tapping into the artist community and using some of the available funding that comes from state grants to evolve how we do interpretation and the opportunities for, reaching new audiences around interpretation and ways of highlighting aspects of a building beyond, the standard interpretive signage and placards and.
Well,
I think
Eric, I
yeah.
agree. There are
Yeah.
opportunities, and nothing
Again,
nothing presents them
I
better.
hate to
than
be the
PR.
curmudgeon. This is very important to me, what you're talking about right now.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I think that we might be a little bit off topic for an HPC meeting. So
Well, the only area
I
I
will
want.
be happy to convene another meeting between Eric and John and me to talk about this. But other commissioners, do you want to continue this discussion or not?
I think it's a very valuable discussion, Tim, and I think it should be continued, but probably not this evening at this time.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
let's put Kim, who'll be hearing this, we'll make a commitment to have another discussion about this topic for a follow-up between John and Eric and me and Will, at least.
Yeah, I think we have, with the timeline that Eric sketched out, we could do something like that and perhaps have some valuable input.
Yeah, because what we're doing here, this is wonderful. It's like a working session, Eric, right? I mean,
Yeah.
This is not a comprehensive planning topic that we're talking about. It's actually a tactic right down on your matrix. So
Yeah.
So I want to be conscious of my commissioners, fellow
Yeah,
commissioners.
no, that makes sense. I mean,
Thanks.
really, the last thing I would share with you, I could probably jump back to something in the beginning maybe, but you're going to continue as a body, you're going to continue to receive projects that are looking at shoreline changes. And this is from our water resources chapter. I believe it's chapter 10. I know you've dealt with the St. Mary's shoreline. There are going to continue to be, particularly at the street ends, and potentially at some of the residential properties, but you're going to continue to have to negotiate this, I would say, 21st century dilemma of protecting a property, mitigating harm, but also protecting its historic value. And I don't think there's going to be easy solution in some of these, but this is just similar to the charging stations. It's just something that comes up in this plan to be aware of that is going to continue to be an issue.
That's valid.
Yeah. Let's see. I think one tip.
Do you have a matrix that the 2009 plan had at the end of this eventually?
We have a pretty excellent matrix. This is an example of it. So if you don't, I've been telling people, I'm sympathetic to having to print the whole document.
Right.
But if you print this chapter 13, recommended action matrix.
There you go. That's the matrix, which is what we all relate to from a
gonna
comprehensive planning point of view. There it is. Bingo.
Yeah. So this is what you're talking about, and you could. I would recommend just printing this. I think it's about 40 pages, I think, and it basically provides that summary chapter by chapter of each goal and recommended action, and you could probably just go through and highlight the ones that you think are relevant or that need where we might have an opportunity to do something more for preservation. But this is just an example from the municipal growth chapter. I just think that's pretty much it.
Where would we look? Where would we, land use, for instance? Can you scroll down to land use, for instance?
Well, let me. I only have a snippet. I can go to the actual document and show you. Let me.
To me, that's where the rubber meets the road in
for sure.
In a comprehensive plan is that the matrix of goals and actions.
Yeah, let me stop sharing for a moment. I'll open up the full document and show you kind of in that. I have the printed one next to me. That doesn't do me much good right now. Bear with me for a minute. Let's see. Okay. Yeah, I kind of recognize. I definitely recognize that the scope of what HPC does is pretty specific, and I think that a lot of the
It
a
is.
lot of
And
With-
what's been interesting to me in this discussion is, yes, our scope is very focused and we are engaged citizens, but preservation is beyond just the historic district. So,
absolutely.
and
Yeah, that's what I was
think
getting
all of
at.
us are engaged in that too. So I think we can comment on that. And the Heritage Commission does as well. So John's role in his office is not just the historic district. So we can use this, platform to have that conversation as well with
Yeah,
with
that's what I was getting at. Is
with
there's a whole-
the other commissioners, hoping that we all feel the same. So have you presented the Heritage Commission, for instance?
we have not, and to be honest, I don't have a good contact at the Heritage Commission, but would be happy to present to them.
Okay. Well,
So
We really, I mean, we've reached out to certain boards and commissions, but others, we want
I
them to sort of-
only say that because of the topic, the Hopi Islands discussion
Yeah.
is important to them. And Marcy Taylor is the chair, so it's a city commission. So
Eric, I'll get you. I can get you in touch. And it's certainly a possible topic for discussion. It might be done on a special meeting because they are very busy getting ready for the 200th anniversary of Lafayette's visit to Annapolis.
Right.
not to mention, the 2026 is a 250 of 1776. So these kinds of forward-looking celebrations of history are important.
Well, we have time. I mean, we can certainly find the time to meet with the Heritage Commission, and we continue to schedule meetings with various boards and commissions.
Okay. You found it.
Yeah. So this is the sheet from the matrix that focuses on the historic district, but I would say downtown, but the historic resource values of downtown is the way it's worded. And so this is, I mean, I can just kind of zoom in on some of the recommendations. I just, again, would encourage you to print this part of the plan out at minimum and just kind of go through, and you can see this reference to other plans. Some of this is certainly ongoing. This is the one on sprinklering.
Sprinklers, yeah, I see it now, yeah.
So these are some of these were in that arts and culture chapter as well, but I think it's valuable that they're in this land use chapter. I mean, this, So this is the
And
one
this is the
dedicated
version of
goal.
the matrix. In the prior plan, it was actually like a matrix. This is the version of the matrix in this plan.
Yes. I actually hadn't, to be honest, I had not seen the one for the last plan. I mean, I don't know if it was like a appendix item or something, but I refer to the 2009 plan all the time. And
Yeah.
in past presentations, I've always said, unlike the last plan, we're going to have an action matrix in this one. It's surprising to hear that there was one. I guess
Well,
maybe-
I'll
yeah.
send it to. I'll send it to you. I was
Okay.
just looking at it today.
We did a lot of analysis early on to kind of understand what has been implemented and what hasn't, but we just didn't use the action matrix document. So I'm
Yeah.
a little embarrassed to say.
So we had meetings in 2019,
Yeah.
and I hope that those were passed on to you.
They were. Yeah.
Yeah, and you have all those notes from December 2nd, 2019. You have those?
I will double check, but most
Yeah.
likely. I think that
We had
maybe what
we had public meetings that Sally ran.
yeah. I think what I'm so
I'm a little
the
worried
matrix-
that stuff was lost sometimes. So
well, the matrix you're referring to, I think just to clarify, it wasn't actually made as part of the last comprehensive plan. I think it was made by a former Eric Borchers, who was trying to capture what was in the last comprehensive plan so we could look at what needs to continue, what's been completed, and areas for new recommendations.
Right.
I could be wrong, but I've seen versions of a matrix that were made specifically for those meetings to kind of look at what was in the last comp plan.
I just want to make sure that you've captured the public meetings that took place in the fall of 2019.
Yeah, no, we have some pretty thorough documentation on the website about those. I'll double check that everything's there, but we can augment the website too. But I'm familiar with those meetings that you're talking about. Just from having
Unfortunately, COVID sidetracked all of those.
Well, this is, I mean, I'm just kind of scrolling at this point through the matrix, but this is the format for the action matrix, and it goes through each chapter of the comprehensive plan. So now we're getting to housing, and may have less relevance to, but there is the recommendation for activating the upper floors in this chapter as well. And so, yeah. So I mean, we jumped around quite a bit.
And I pushed you around.
The emphasis I want to make is, unfortunately, there is a need to read different sections of the comprehensive plan to understand the thrust of preservation and the importance of the historic district to this plan. I mean, I sort of sympathize with those who say, it's hard to find in certain, but it's in there in various places. I think it's just, it's oriented to the theme, of the chapter. But yeah, I'm happy to answer any other questions.
Other commissioners? All right. Well, thank you. And I think before you talk, John, for other commissioners, please do look at the sections that, especially, I guess, in the land, the action items in that matrix that have to do with the historic district. And if you have comments, please feed them back directly. I think, Eric, can you tell us how we give you feedback?
Well, there's two basic ways. Given that the comment period ends in late September, and you're probably not meeting in August, it may be difficult to produce a letter of recommendation or
actually,
edits or
personally, other commissioners, you can correct me if I'm wrong. I think we as individuals can comment. I don't think it's incumbent on the Preservation Commission to have a formal comment. What do
That's what we
you all think?
encourage.
What do you all think? Will, you've been through this.
I think you have the authority to do it either way. If the time allowed and you thought that it was worth the time of the commission, Tim, I believe you have the authority to say, I propose we do this and ask the rest of us to participate. But the other course is, as you were saying, and I think you're right, we can comment individually. We simply must make it clear we don't speak for the other commissioners.
I think it would be cumbersome for us to comment as a commission because it's such an expansive plan. And I don't think the code requires us to do that in any way. So I would encourage each of us as commissioners to provide feedback.
Thank you. Yeah, that is exactly what we'll be encouraging other boards and commissions to do. And
the planning
most
commission,
expedient and
the planning commission. The planning commission is in charge of all this. So
they're required by law.
Exactly, and we are not. But please, all of us is engaged, and beyond the historic district, obviously, we should be talking about the whole plan. So
have the presentation, Gary, and
there's a link on the website to comment, right?
Yes, that's right. We are happy to receive comments by email. That's perfectly fine.
We're stopping you in the garage.
Right. Accosting planning staff anywhere in the city is fine. But you have the presentation that I think Sherry sent to you, and I did try to pull out the specific goals that I thought would be most relevant to HPC from different chapters. So you can kind of scroll through that presentation and look for those slides. But again, that action matrix should be clear in the goals if there's a reference to historic or preservation.
Wordsmithing and amplification are things that are missing. Each of us can.
We're happy to entertain those suggestions. Absolutely.
Are there other public meetings in the next 6 weeks before, or is this all just?
There's going to be two more. So we have the planning commission meetings every 2 weeks, but then in terms of in-person, more broad community meetings, we're going to do 2 more in early September. Right now we're looking at September 6th and September 9th. That would be 2 weeks before the planning commission's last meeting. And so we just wanted to get out in front of anybody who didn't get a chance to come to an in-person meeting already. But other than that, like I mentioned, we're going to be at the Ward 1 Residents Association on August 8th, and there's a few other meetings in the works with other neighborhoods in the city, Germantown, Homewood, perhaps, Heritage communities, et cetera. So,
thanks. All right. I'm sorry, John, I cut you off. What would you like to say?
Well, just to address the residential challenges for the historic district, I learn faster than anyone how quickly apartment buildings are purchased by investors and turned into short-term rentals. 3 multi-unit apartment buildings, houses that were converted into apartments, have recently been purchased by investors. I think it's a total of 16 units. And they will never be long-term rentals unless our hospitality economy changes drastically. I know there's an emphasis on making sure that visitors have places to stay, but it's literally happening at the expense of the ability for people to walk to their jobs, or possibly have a moderate, a home, even if it's a rental, that is supported by a moderate income. So that's one thing. Second, and I've said this before to you in the office area, getting landlords to convert their third floor or second floor residential units back to residential units for buildings where they stay, where they're vacant is, I've only seen it happen once since I've been with the city, and it was Jonathan Hollander who did the project. So it's really the incentives that are going to be required to get property owners to consider those things is, I think they're going to have to be substantial if we're going to have those spaces occupied. And then third, I do think that there's an important element that isn't necessarily within the plan for the historic district, and that is that we should encourage, if we can, accessory dwelling units, and they should be long-term rentals, if they're rentals at all, and not short-term rentals, because what we're trying to do is to encourage residency. And there are opportunities for ADUs within the historic district, but they haven't been explored. So those are just comments for residency, because I see the residential units being swallowed up by investors on a weekly basis, and it's more than a trend. It's an established trend, and it's the
Problem all over the country.
Yeah, it's the dominant trend within the historic district. So we have to figure out alternatives.
Yes, you kind of have the perfect storm of conditions in a place like downtown Annapolis, where you have this tourism economy that's driving a lot. You have kind of limitations on lodging options, and then you have a high price of real estate that makes it difficult for people to necessarily buy a single family residence or so I agree. I mean, I think that in crafting our guidance on short-term rentals, we tried to strike a balance in terms of this emphasis on owner-occupied properties, because there is a difference. I mean, I think to the degree that downtown has probably the highest concentration of short-term rentals in the city, and there's value in having the accessory dwelling units be used for long-term rentals. Perhaps there's an opportunity to carve out places in the city where if you do create an accessory dwelling unit, that it's focused on long-term rentals. But I know that was a third rail issue when the ADU legislation was approved, that
Better believe it.
Yeah.
What's the role of comprehensive planning in this topic? You're guiding very specific code changes. How do you put this type of guidance into a comprehensive plan? It seems to be so specific. So Eric, where in the plan is it there, number one, so far? And how specific can it be?
Well, I shared the pages that focus on short-term rentals. That's in our housing chapter. It does not get into, it's possible that I think downtown Annapolis is referenced there just partly because that's where the largest concentration of short-term rentals
Kind of a no-brainer, right?
But no, I mean, the recommendation is more broad. I think what I'm talking about here, I'm just kind of riffing a little bit, but the recommendation is that we do need to revise our short-term rental standards if we're trying to reduce the number of situations that John is describing. And that plays out through legislation. I mean, the comprehensive plan provides some guidance for the kinds of legislation that we need, but it doesn't write the legislation. I think that's a key distinction. We still need city council to act on these recommendations, and crafting legislation can be extremely challenging to get the right outcome. So we look at broad patterns.
Would you say that the stronger the language in the comprehensive plan gives strength?
Yeah, I mean, the comprehensive plan
not only
gets
short-term rentals, but ADUs. So the stronger the language is, would you say that helps the city council pass legislation?
No.
It does.
No, Will says no. Okay.
No.
I know.
Right. Actually, you're right. Will, you're right. It does.
To the other commissioners, thank you for letting us kind of go off topic here a little bit, but it's important. I think it's interesting. What is the strength of a comprehensive plan if it cannot compel city council to act?
Well, if you look at our comprehensive plans and you look at others from similar situated cities, you'll find that there's all these vague passages and broad sweeping recommendations. And that's so that the elected officials can do whatever the hell they want.
Oh,
that's what's
not
happened.
what I was saying.
I've been involved for 45 years. That's what happens here.
Yeah.
Well,
Eric,
not to make everybody cynical.
it's a statement. It's aspirational. I guess it's aspirational, if I would say, Eric.
Yes,
aspirational, but also actionable. I mean, you're not going to see a long-term recommendation in here because we want things that can get implemented, you know? But it's an advisory document.
That was a tangent. But John's points, John had 3 points there that hopefully you'll hear and take into consideration.
Certain individuals that could impact change.
Okay.
To the economic.
Any other?
Every day.
Thank you, everyone. Any other comments, thoughts?
Could make a difference by
Well, thank you, Eric. Appreciate it.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Thanks very much, Eric.
We can help clarify anything.
Individually, feel free. Please comment. This will be in the minutes, and I think that reflects our participation at this point in the comp planning process.
You would challenge everything.
All right.
Motion to adjourn.
Oh well, yes. Any other business? I only have one little thing, and that's an apology. I had hoped to make some progress in the last 2 weeks on the RFP for our guideline, and I just got distracted. Well, it's summertime. I was playing around. So John and I agreed that during the month of August, there are technical aspects to an RFP for the guideline revisions in terms of procurement. And I need to write the statement of work, and I will do that in the month of August. So we'll meet in September, and then the other thing is hopefully we will in September also have a training session, another update in terms of guideline, in terms of design review. We have funds that are provided to us from our CLG status to access training. And even though we might have been through it before, it's always nice to have just a discussion. Even if it's not training per se, just a kind of an open discussion about how we deal with guidelines. So hopefully with one of our 2 sessions in September, we'll have on our agenda a training session. And it helps us maintain our CLG status. So Jackie, did you have something to say?
I just wanted to thank you for, the policy clarification that we're going to do a preliminary zoning review before you all review projects on a preliminary basis. I think that's really going to make things much better for, John and I and for the commission in terms of what you're looking at. So I really wanted to thank you.
Well, thank you for actually bringing it to our attention. You and John work together, and we're here to support you, I believe.
You won't be seeing any projects because we're just going to deny them all from a zoning point of view.
Okay, we're still on, yeah,
I know, I'm sorry. I didn't really mean that, but
you did.
it has caused some adjustments to things you've already seen.
No, I
so.
think over time, our pre-application process, we've done our best to extend
Yes,
courtesy, and sometimes you all have to
right. Well,
make
there's
sure.
similar issues with the process with the planning commission that they, projects can go there and then people bring their projects and they seem to think that if the planning commission is like, okay with it, that somehow all the zoning issues
It has to.
can be worked out. So it's a balance thing.
It is
So-
a balance, and
But thank you
you're welcome.
and have a nice
I
August.
speak for the
off.
commissioners. Yes. All right. Have a nice August. Motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second,
All in favor?
aye.
Aye.